Erickson, and I'm the BNRC Council Chair. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I have just a couple of comments, really for the council who's marked tonight. So, we got 5 comment letters on the planning doc. Wanted everybody to know that, so we've got those. Pat's made the first cut at making those changes to the planning document. So our next meeting, which is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, September 8th, let me know if that doesn't work, we'll be talking about those. He's going to get those changes back to us, back to MRD, to Carol, to review and all of that. So then they'll get it back to us and we'll look at those changes at the next meeting. And let's see, we don't have the fingerprint report yet from the Bureau, but that's coming hopefully soon this fall. So that may be one of our next meetings. And we'd also like to have Youth Silverbow, so that's an upcoming meeting also. The other thing that I'd like to do tonight is invite everyone to the CTEC meeting on Tuesday, August 16th, and in that meeting we're going to have EPA's going to come over and talk about the unilateral administrative order that just came out and the explanation of significant difference. So both of those things will be on the agenda for that Tuesday night meeting. It's right here in the Thornton building, but downstairs in Baldwin.
Just a clarification, we're not giving a presentation, we'll be at the meeting, CTEC's doing the presentation.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. It's going to be up here?
I think we'll have it this room.
Okay. Up here in this room. So I think that's about all I have for tonight. So I'd like to welcome our guests tonight that are here to speak with us. We have Will McDowell, who's going to talk about the aquatic restoration strategy for the Upper Clark Fork Basin. He's with the Clark Fork Coalition, and he's going to explain to us what their plan is, and maybe we'll look at ways that we can integrate some of what we're doing with what they're doing to make that money go a little bit further. And we also have Rod McNeil with us, and he's doing the Silverbow Creek Use Attainability Analysis. He's going to talk about that tonight and let us know where he's at with that and where that's going. So I think Will's first. Is that correct? Okay.
Okay, thanks for having me. My name is Will McDowell, and I work for the Clark Fork Coalition. I'm the Stream Restoration Director for the Coalition, and we've had a program focused on stream restoration. We call it Vital Rivers, just for the past 2 years. The Coalition, some of you may know, it's a nonprofit organization, headquartered in Missoula, works in the whole Clark Fork basin to protect and restore the Clark Fork River. It's a membership organization, have close to 2,000 members spread around the Clark Fork basin. Up until its first 23 years of existence, it worked primarily on policy-related projects and advocacy. Worked very hard on things like getting the Milltown Dam removed in the Missoula area and those types of activities. 2 years ago, the board asked the staff to start a new program to work more on the ground in the Upper Clark Fork, doing restoration projects that complement projects that are already programmed under Superfund, remediation and restoration with the state of Montana and the other entities involved. So I started up then, and one of the first things that we did when we started looking at the Clark Fork, and we really took a big picture view at first, the whole basin in terms of where we want to work on restoration. We looked at the Bitterroot, the Blackfoot, Middle Clark Fork, all the way up into the Upper Clark Fork. And one of the first things we did is we started to focus in on the Upper Clark Fork and the opportunities up here, is we started looking at partners and who was already working up here. So I'm going to mention an organization called Watershed Restoration Coalition a number of times. You may or may not know about them. They're a landowner-based nonprofit based in Deer Lodge. They've been around about 11 years. Their executive director, Ted Dodge, is here with us, so I hope that he'll get a chance to answer some questions or say a few words about Watershed Restoration Coalition. I work full-time for the Clark Fork Coalition, but a part of my work through a memorandum of understanding is to actually serve for 2 days a week as a project coordinator for the WRC. So Ted's also my boss. I'm one of those unfortunate people that has multiple bosses. But in any case, I want to talk more about our strategy, and this is really a strategy that was put together by the coalition over a period of time, working with a lot of partners. This is a picture of the Clark Fork River, and that is a little stream called Dry Cottonwood Creek coming in. That's Parasini Pond down below, and this reach happens to be a reach that is owned by it's a 2,000-acre ranch owned by the Clark Fork Coalition with 2 partners. So we actually are involved in farming and ranching in the area as well as restoration. This reach on the ranch includes over 3 linear miles of the stream and over 2 miles of the floodplain that is in the area scheduled to be cleaned up through the remediation actions that are planned for the next couple of years. There's intensive sampling going on in this floodplain right now. But this strategy that I'm going to talk to you about tonight is really about the whole basin. It's not about the Superfund cleanup so much as it is the opportunity presented by the Superfund cleanup to look at the whole system as an aquatic ecosystem and say, if we're cleaning up the river, is that going to solve the problems with the ecosystem at the level of freshwater ecology? Or are we going to have to work in the tributaries too? In our view, very strongly is you've got to work in the tributaries in order to have a healthy system, because the tributaries have problems too. So that's kind of what this is about. This is important. This is not a plan. We do not have a detailed plan that we're going to implement. We have a vision of what we think needs to be done in some areas of the Upper Clark Fork. And so what we're doing is we're coming out to groups like yours and conservation districts and county groups and as many other groups as we can get in front of that are interested in what's going on in the Upper Clark Fork. And we're saying, these are some ideas we have. Are these ideas that complement your ideas that you guys are already working on? Because a lot of people are working on restoration-related ideas in the Upper Clark Fork. A lot of organizations. So that's what we're trying to do, is share some ideas and get a bigger conversation going about what a basin-wide restoration effort would look like. So one of the things, well, let me state this for a second. One of the things that really struck me as I've been working in the western U.S. in natural resources for quite a few years, and one of the things that's really important that I picked up from range management people a long time ago, down in the Southwest. Alan Savory is a guy that some of you who might have worked in rangeland have heard of, but he kind of revolutionized a lot of thinking over the last 20 years in range management in the western U.S., and a lot of people use his ideas on the ground in Montana. And one of the things he said is, when you start a process of doing restoration, you don't start with science. And for a technical guy like me, that makes me step back and wait a minute. Isn't that where, isn't that what we need? We need data. We need to figure out what to do. And his thinking, which I think makes a ton of sense, is you've got to start with a vision of where you want to get to. Because values of the people involved are going to influence the destination. And if you don't know what the destination looks like, and you can't describe the final destination in restoration, then no, we don't know where to start and how to get there. It's like, if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter how good your maps and your resources are. You've got to figure out where you're going first and then try to get there. So what we've tried to do is elaborate, as I said again, a vision of what restoration would look like. And we focused in on an area that we're starting to get to know better through our work with WRC and other partners. The ranch that I mentioned that Clark Fork Coalition manages is right here. So in this general area of the Deer Lodge Valley, coming up past Opportunity into the Butte area, this area in Upper Clark Fork, we started putting some things on paper that we know, and there's a lot, obviously, that we don't know. These are some things, if you look at today, that we know about what's going on out there on the ground. And we're looking at this again from the point of view of aquatic health. So what's going on with the streams and the river out there that we know about? Well, of course, we know that this whole Reach A has severe metals contamination. A lot of study, a lot of work going into how that's going to be remediated. We also know some things about the tributaries, too, that are important to us, and how they interconnect to the main stem. These dotted lines here signify streams that are on the state dewatered stream list. And so you can see, if you start looking at this like a fish, which wants to move around through the system, as all of our native fish do, into tributaries, out of tributaries, downstream, back upstream, different times of year, you start seeing, wait a minute, we've got a dewatered main stem, we've got a dewatered stream here, a dewatered stream here, a dewatered stream here, on and on and on. Every major stream in that reach has dewatered reaches near the main stem. So it's a disconnected system. So you start to see, okay, that's a problem. You don't have water flowing at all times of year that it normally would from the tributaries to the main stem. You've got other issues. You've got issues with habitat. This is an attempt to sort of schematically talk about restoration. You've got Silverbow Creek undergoing a major restoration project with some really exciting early results in terms of fisheries response and water quality that you guys probably are extremely familiar with, more than I am. You've had some other projects done. There was a $1 million investment made in Lost Creek in the late 90s and early 2000s by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks with some NRD money and some other monies, a lot of monies from DEQ. But the reality is, and we've spent the last 2 summers walking these streams with field techs from WRC. We've walked dozens and dozens of miles of streams. And what you find is that riparian habitat, which is so key to fisheries and wildlife and water quality, the riparian habitat is mediocre to poor in many areas. And the good riparian habitat is scattered. Again, disconnected. Little bits of good habitat separated by areas of not so good or even atrociously bad habitat. So you're disconnected at the habitat level riparian-wise, and then you look at your native fish, where are they? These yellow highlights are your native cutthroat trout populations. Where are they? Are they connected to each other? No, they're disparate populations in the headwaters, mostly on Forest Service ground, not entirely. For example, down here in Dry Cottonwood, we have west slope cutthroats coming all the way down within a half a mile of the river, and some of these other streams do too. Last year in Cottonwood Creek up there by Deer Lodge, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks tracked a big 16-inch cutthroat trout, put a radio tag in it downstream near the Little Blackfoot in the main stem of the Clark Fork River. The darn thing swam upstream right into the middle of the Superfund area. Everyone knows native trout don't survive in highly contaminated metals environments. Swam right up into downtown Deer Lodge, swam through downtown Deer Lodge, over 10 different irrigation diversions, jumped them all like a salmon, went 5 miles upstream into the National Forest and spawned up here in Baxter. Went back downstream, went down an irrigation diversion, went out in the field, and got caught by an osprey or a grizzly bear. They're not sure which, but the radio ended up in a tree. Okay, so we know that's not where fish normally hang out. So the problem is a lot of these tributaries have multiple diversions on them. So we know that there's remnant populations of cutthroat that want to re-inhabit and re-occupy these migratory corridors if they get through all the problems, starting with the metals contamination and going on to irrigation diversions and other things. But these diversions break up the tributaries into little chunks too. And as the juvenile fish try to migrate downstream out of these upstream refuges, what happens to them? They go down the irrigation diversions because a lot of times And these little streams, by this time of the year, there's more water going down the irrigation canals than there are going down the stream channel. So what does the fish do? The fish are going downstream, the little juvenile cutthroats are going downstream, they follow the largest amount of water, before they know it, they're in the middle of a hayfield. So you've got another disconnection problem. So, if there's all those problems going on, and others, what are we actually looking for? Remember I talked about Alan Savory and the vision of where we're trying to get to. Well, this is our vision. Ambitious, some people would say unrealistic. Frankly, I thought it was more unrealistic a couple of years ago before I heard about how much West Slope cutthroat trout were re-inhabiting Silverbow Creek right now, and you guys are starting to learn about that. It's pretty damn exciting what is happening. I think we have opportunities not only in Silverbow Creek, but throughout the whole Silverbow Creek, Warm Springs Creek, Upper Deer Lodge Valley. Opportunities to restore, reconnect this habitat. And that means the aquatic habitat, move water back into these systems at the times of year where it needs water, it doesn't have water, reconnect riparian habitat by habitat improvement projects, get fish populations reconnected so that they can move up and down the system. That's what we're hoping to see. 2020, that's part of our vision. That's kind of the aquatic ecology part of the vision. And so that's what we want to steer towards. That may or may not be all the right pieces, but we hope that groups like yours can help us figure out what makes more sense. One of the key things that we started thinking about in terms of, okay, if those are outcomes we want to get to, who are our allies? Who are our partners? How are we going to work effectively on a landscape scale to restore streams? Well, first thing is, let's get realistic. Who's got the water rights? Where's the water go? Probably 90% of the water in the Upper Clark Fork that's actually beneficially used is used for agriculture. So we've got to work with the agricultural community, engage the agricultural community, and get them interested in the kinds of projects that would, on one hand, restore water and habitat, and on the other hand, obviously, strategically, it's got to benefit agriculture. There's no way that we can work effectively if we're not working hand in hand with agriculture. And the agricultural community, we're finding, isn't as hostile to the idea of changing the way that water is managed as we initially thought. In fact, they're the ones coming up with the good ideas in the Deer Lodge Valley right now about what to do different and how to change things in ways that often will benefit the fishery, the flow in the stream, the temperature of the stream, and will benefit them and their business. I just, this afternoon was up looking at a project being built upstream of Deer Lodge in Cottonwood Creek right now, where a guy's putting in 3 pivots to irrigate his ground. He and his dad have been flood irrigating for 2 generations, and they are putting in pivots. They're being built this week. They're putting in a pipeline to feed part of that pivot with gravity flow so that it avoids having to pay a huge electric bill. And what do you need when you put in a pipeline and pivots? You need a screen to keep the dirt out of the irrigation system. Well, you build the screen right, it also is a screen for fish. So that the screen, which we saw being put in this afternoon, will take water out of Cottonwood Creek. It's got a senior water right, a major water right. Debris and small fish that come into the irrigation system will be screened and shunted right back out into the stream, 20 feet downstream of the diversion. And the water that's filtered will go down to the irrigation system. So we see a huge benefit in engaging the agricultural community in projects like that, and we really think there are more win-win projects out there than you would imagine. We're trying to work with some other folks that I can tell you more about if you're interested, who are interested in leasing water, other people who are interested in selling water rights, not because they want to get out of farming, but because they put in more efficient irrigation systems. They don't even need all their water rights anymore, some people. They've actually got extra water, which in some parts of Montana, including parts of the Deer Lodge Valley, seems like, oh, that's crazy. Everybody knows the streams are over-appropriated. There's no extra water. It's crazy. Well, actually, there's people that don't need any more water. They actually have more water than they need, mostly because a huge amount of people have gone to sprinkler irrigation versus what they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago was almost all flood irrigation. People going to sprinkler irrigation on a large scale is totally changing the way and the timing that water is moving. But the agricultural community is the only community that we need to work with closely. We need to work with communities that are more urban, like Anaconda, like Deer Lodge, like Butte, and the smaller communities in the area that have a huge investment in how water is managed, and how streams are managed, and how wastewater is managed. And those communities have a lot to do with what is going to happen and what needs to happen in this area. So we want to work with all of those communities to find mutually beneficial projects. One of the things I think is really interesting about what's going on in Silverbow Creek right now, and I imagine this council talks a lot about Silverbow Creek. It's probably something you guys are very familiar with. So what you've got is a situation in Silverbow Creek where you're actually being tremendously successful in cleaning up the metals problem in the creek and alleviating huge toxic load on that waterway and improving it in so many ways. And as that problem is alleviated, another problem comes to the fore, which is the fact that there are so many nutrients in Silverbow Creek that you've got a huge algae problem and you've got an oxygen problem, and you guys have heard all about that. But this is the way that these type of problems work. The problems are in layers, so as you resolve one problem, you've got other problems that come to the fore that also need to be resolved. So we need to be working at multiple scales, at the scale of the whole river system, and at the scale of each tributary, and sort of unpeeling the onion, figuring out what are all the different constraints in a given system. There's some problems, like nutrients, are not only a problem in Silverbow Creek. I worked for 10 years for the Tri-State Water Quality Council. We worked on nutrients in the Clark Fork from Butte all the way down to Superior. Well, actually all the way down to Lake Pend Oreille. And great progress was actually made on that problem. There's a lot more that needs to be done. For example, Silverbow Creek and some other areas still have severe problems of that type. Other problems really need to be tackled specifically at the tributary level, like fish passage and other problems that we have to tackle at that level. But we've got to understand that we've got to work simultaneously at the big picture level on big picture problems and at the little detail level on little problems. But we also have to figure out where we're going to focus more of our resources, because we can't work in the whole upper Clark Fork at the same time. The Clark Fork Coalition can't. I don't think a coalition of every conservation district and 5 state agencies and everybody else that wants to throw in and get involved